Wheaton College hazing assault, 2016. They called it team bonding. He called it torture. In 2016, freshman football player Charles Nagy thought he was joining a brotherhood at Wheaton College, one of America's top Christian schools. That night, after a normal evening in his dorm, the knock on his door changed everything. His teammates burst in, tied him up, threw a pillowcase over his head, and drove him into the night. What happened next would end his football career and nearly destroy him. According to court filings, the players duct-taped his wrists and ankles, covered his head, and shoved him into the trunk of a car. During the ride, they punched and slapped him, ripped down his shorts, and threatened sexual assault, even attempting to sodomize him with an object. Still bound and half naked, they dumped him on a baseball field outside campus. He suffered 2 torn shoulder labrums requiring surgery, and described being mocked with racist accents while he cried for help. Those behind this heinous act were 5 upperclassmen: James Cooksey, Kyler Kriegel, Benjamin Petway, Noah Spielman, son of former NFL linebacker Chris Spielman, and Samuel Tubos, later charged with felony aggravated battery, unlawful restraint, and mob action. After the attack, people started asking questions about how the school handled it. Inside Wheaton College, some staff members were accused of ignoring warning signs and pretending the problem wasn't serious. Later, reports showed that the school's investigators didn't really believe Charles. They wrote that he wasn't telling the truth, while saying the players' stories sounded more believable. As time went on, the criminal cases slowly fell apart. By 2019, all the players avoided jail. The last one, Benjamin Petway, only had to admit to a minor charge called disorderly conduct. The others made deals where they had to do community service or were punished for smaller crimes like battery, but none went to prison. A year earlier, in 2018, Charles filed a lawsuit against the college and 7 teammates. He said hazing was an open secret that happened every year, and that the school knew about it but did nothing. Wheaton denied doing anything wrong, but its reputation took a big hit. Wheaton College had once been known as a shining example of Christian values. After this, many saw it as hypocritical, a school that protected its athletes instead of the truth. The case showed that hazing isn't harmless fun or boys being boys. It's bullying that leaves real scars. For Charles, the pain didn't stop when the news stories ended. He left school, hurt both physically and emotionally. California Polytechnic State University football team plane crash. This tragedy was so bad, it almost wiped out an entire football team. On October 29, 1960, the Cal Poly Mustangs had just played a game against Bowling Green State in Ohio. The players were tired but happy. It was just another night, another flight home. They climbed aboard a twin-engine Curtiss C-46F commando plane, never knowing it was about to become one of the last flights. Just minutes after takeoff from Toledo Express Airport, the plane went down in the fog. It was so thick you could barely see, and then, amidst all that invisibility, disaster struck, and the plane plunged into the ground. When rescuers reached the crash site, what they found was heartbreaking. 22 people were dead, including 16 players, the team manager, a booster, and both pilots. Many others were injured so badly that football would never be the same for them. Investigators later found out the crash should have never happened. The plane was overloaded by more than 2,000 pounds. One of the engines was faulty, and, believe it or not, the pilot's license had been suspended. Add 50-mile-per-hour winds and dense fog, and it was a disaster waiting to happen. The airline, Arctic Pacific Airlines, already had a bad record. Days later, the FAA shut them down, saying they'd shown a gross disregard for public safety. Cal Poly canceled the rest of the season. They stopped traveling out of California for years. Families went to court, fighting for justice, and finally, by the mid-1960s, they received a $502,000 settlement, a big sum then, but small compared to the loss. Today, the Mustang Memorial Plaza at Alex G. Spanos Stadium stands to remember those 22 lives. That night didn't just break hearts, it changed aviation rules for college teams forever. Auburn players gunned down, 2012. This tragedy hit like a lightning bolt out of nowhere. It was the kind of night that was supposed to be all laughs, music, and summer vibes, not sirens and gunshots. On June 9th, 2012, Students near Auburn University were hanging out at an off-campus pool party. Nothing fancy, just people chilling, talking, dancing. But then a dumb argument broke out, reportedly over a woman. And before anyone could step in, gunfire ripped through the crowd. When the chaos stopped, 2 former Auburn linemen, Ladarius Phillips and Ed Christian, were dead. A third man, Demario Pitts, was also killed. Eric Mack, a current Auburn player, was badly hurt but somehow lived. Imagine that, 4 young guys with their whole futures ahead of them. And in a blink, it was gone. The shooter, Desmonte Leonard, a 22-year-old from Montgomery with a violent past, bolted right after the shots. For days, Alabama was on edge. The police were everywhere. Helicopters overhead, news alerts non-stop. Leonard finally surrendered after hiding out at a relative's house. 2 years later, a jury found him guilty of capital murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. For Auburn, this was a nightmare. Just 2 years after winning the national championship, they were back in the headlines. Not for football glory, but for tragedy. Thousands showed up at candlelight vigils, crying, hugging, praying, all trying to make sense of how a normal college night could end in so much pain. Notre Dame Tower Tragedy, 2010. This story still gives people chills because it should have never happened. Declan Sullivan was just 20 years old, a junior at Notre Dame who loved movies, music, and making short films. He wasn't a football star. He filmed the team's practices for the school's video crew. But on October 27, 2010, that simple job turned deadly. That afternoon, Declan climbed up a hydraulic scissor lift about 50 feet in the air to record football practice. The problem is, the weather was terrible. The wind was blowing over 50 miles per hour, hard enough to bend goalposts and make the field shake. The National Weather Service had warned people to stay indoors, but practice went on anyway. Up on that swaying lift, Declan knew something was wrong. He even tweeted from his phone, half joking, "Gusts of wind up to 60 miles per hour? Well, today will be fun at work. I guess I've lived long enough." Minutes later, the unthinkable happened. The lift toppled and he crashed to the ground. Declan was rushed to a hospital, but it was too late. When investigators looked into it, what they found was infuriating. Notre Dame had no safety plan for student workers, ignored wind warnings, and used the lift in unsafe conditions. The state of Indiana fined the university, and head coach Brian Kelly faced heavy criticism for allowing practice to continue. Notre Dame later reached a settlement with Declan's family, but money couldn't fix what was broken. His death wasn't caused by football, but by negligence, a chain of bad decisions that cost a young man his life. And it left everyone asking, how could a place built on discipline and faith have missed something so obvious? The Lizzie Seberg suicide, 2010, just weeks after Declan Sullivan's death. Another tragedy hit Notre Dame, and this one hit straight at its moral core. Elizabeth Lizzie Seberg was just 19, a freshman at St. Mary's College, right across the street from Notre Dame. On August 31st, 2010, she told campus police she'd been sexually assaulted by a Notre Dame football player. She said he grabbed her face, forced a kiss, and pulled her into his dorm room, and that she froze in fear. At first, Lizzie thought doing the right thing, reporting it, would protect her, but instead, she got threats. Another player texted her, "Don't do anything you would regret. Messing with Notre Dame football is a bad idea." Think about that for a second. She was scared, and now she was being told to stay quiet. 10 days later, on September 10th, 2010, Lizzie took her own life. She felt unheard and trapped, believing no one would stand up for her against the power of the football program. It only got worse after. Investigators didn't even interview the accused player, Prince Shembo, until 15 days after Lizzie's report, which was 5 days after she died. He was never charged. Notre Dame called it a tragedy, but to a lot of people, it looked like they'd chosen to protect their image instead of a young woman who needed help. Lizzie's story became a rallying cry for change, proof that silence and delay can destroy lives just as much as violence itself. UVA campus shooting, 2022. On November 13, 2022, a charter bus full of University of Virginia students was heading back from a class trip to Washington, D.C. They'd gone to see a play about Emmett Till, a 14-year-old black boy whose 1955 murder became became a turning point in the American civil rights movement. So when the shooting happened later that night, right after students had spent the day watching a story about racial violence and injustice, the irony and heartbreak hit even harder. They had just watched history on stage and then lived through their own tragedy on the ride home. A former UVA football player, Christopher Darnell Jones Jr., pulled out a gun and opened fire. He wasn't even in the class originally. He'd been invited along. Earlier that day, he'd sent text messages to family saying he loved them and something would happen today. On the bus, he sat isolated, muttering to himself. About 2 hours before the shooting, he told a mentor to call a lawyer and hinted the football guys were messing with me all day. At around 10:15 p.m., near the UVA Drama Building's parking garage, he started shooting. He yelled, "Y'all been fucking with me all day," then fired the first shots. Victims who were caught in the crossfire were Lavelle Davis Jr., junior wide receiver from South Carolina, Deshaun Perry, junior linebacker from Miami, Devin Chandler, junior wide receiver from North Carolina. All three were members of the football team and were killed. A fourth teammate, Mike Hollins, and another student were wounded. After the shots rang out, the campus locked down for about 12 hours. Students hid, phones buzzed with alerts. Run, hide, fight. The suspect fled, but on November 14th at about 11:24 a.m., he was arrested in Henrico County. The shooter's background raised alarm bells. Jones had been hazed as a walk-on on the UVA football team in 2018. As his peers said, investigators had noted concerns about him owning a gun as early as September 2022, and even a concealed weapon incident in February 2021. Yet despite warnings, nothing stopped him that night. Penn State's Forgotten Predator, 1978. This one doesn't get talked about much, maybe because it's too ugly, too early, or just too inconvenient for a school that once called itself Success with Honor. But long before Jerry Sandusky's scandal, Penn State already had a predator hiding in plain sight. His name was Todd Hodden, a linebacker recruited in 1977 from Long Island. On the field, he barely left a mark. Off the field, he left scars that never healed. Between 1978 and 1979, Hodney went on a violent spree of sexual assaults, attacking at least a dozen women around the Penn State campus. Investigators later said he wasn't just another criminal, he was one of the most dangerous men they had ever encountered. The worst part? He was living among students, wearing the same jersey, walking the same halls, while leaving a trail of trauma behind him. In October 1978, police finally caught him. Fingerprints and a traced phone call tied him to the attacks. Hodney was convicted of sexual assault and kicked off Joe Paterno's team. But here's where everything went wrong. Instead of being locked up, he was released on bail and allowed to go home to New York. And, once again, he started attacking women. The system had given a predator another chance. Years later, things got even darker. In 1987, Hodney murdered a taxi driver during a robbery. He was convicted and spent the rest of his life in prison. Dying there in 2020, prosecutors described him as one of the most dangerous offenders I've ever faced. But at the time, Penn State didn't fully confront what had happened. There were no press conferences, no reckonings, no public outrage. The university, and much of the football world, moved on, quietly. It wasn't until decades later, when ESPN dug into the case, that the truth finally resurfaced. The warnings had been there all along. Coaches, police, administrators, people who could have stopped him, didn't. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was denial, or maybe it was that old college football disease, protecting the program at all costs. Northwestern's hazing scandal, 2023. In the summer of 2023, Northwestern University, known for its academic prestige, was engulfed in a scandal of humiliation and abuse. Whispers of hazing in the football locker room turned into disturbing revelations of systemic misconduct. Investigations revealed years of coerced sexual acts, forced nudity, and degrading rituals masquerading as team bonding. Former players described a toxic culture where upperclassmen enforced punishment, and some coaches allegedly gave signals for when hazing was to occur. What had begun as tradition turned into ritualized cruelty. Initially, the university handed legendary head coach Pat Fitzgerald just a 2-week suspension, but public outrage erupted when graphic details emerged. Within days, Fitzgerald was fired, ending a 17-year career. The scandal shocked the nation not just for what happened, but for where it happened. At an elite academic institution supposedly built on integrity, Northwestern's reputation collapsed overnight, proving that even schools that pride themselves on discipline can hide abuse when accountability fails. And there it is. From hazing and cover-ups to crashes and shootings, these stories show that football isn't just about glory under the lights, it's also about the people who get lost in the shadows. And behind every scandal or tragedy, there's always a chance someone would have spoken up, could have said stop, could have changed everything. It's easy to forget that these are real lives. Students, friends, kids, chasing a jersey and a future, but maybe remembering them, telling their stories, is how we make sure it doesn't happen again. So if you learned something today, or if any of these stories hit you like they hit me, take a second to share this video, drop a comment, and let me know which story shocked you the most. And hey, if you want more stories like this, the real unfiltered side of sports, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around.